Hey guys, welcome back to the Becoming Anchor podcast. So glad that you're here with us today. Just to reintroduce ourselves, I'm Lauren Jackson, and this is Laura Deneen. We're two therapists in the Brentwood area, just south of Nashville. We work in a group private practice with 8 other therapists. We adore what we do. We see all kinds of different presentations all through the lifespan. And we really are just so glad to be here and kind of expanding our reach a little bit. So welcome, and hope you enjoyed today's episode.
Yeah, thanks, Lauren. So today we are going to be talking about practicing authenticity in our everyday lives. This is actually one of my values that really guides the decisions that I make and how I choose to spend my time and who I choose to spend my time with. So I love the idea of practicing authenticity. Here on the podcast, we're all about, first and foremost, being real with you guys. We are humans before we are therapists. And so we really are just here to share our real life stories and experiences. Of course, we can also offer that therapeutic lens of some of the wisdom that we've gleaned over the years in practice. But yeah, we're here to just do this life with y'all and to share from an honest, authentic place. So that's really the purpose of the Becoming Anchored podcast. If you're here for the first time, Lauren and I will both be sharing about our experiences. And then at the end of every episode, we are going to be giving y'all an affirmation along with further homework that you can be working on just to further your own kind of experience and introspection, and hopefully a chance for each of you to practice authenticity.
Yeah, thanks, Laura. A quick disclaimer. So we say this at every episode, but this is really meant for informational purposes only. This isn't meant to be therapy in any way or replace your therapy. So if, as you're listening, you find that you would benefit from your own personal therapy journey, either reach out to us. We'd love to work with you. Or if you're not local, find somebody local near you.
Gosh, I remember one of the first sessions I had with my therapist who treated me actually for my eating disorder. Gosh, I want to say 12 or 13 years ago now. I will always hold such a special place in my heart for her. And I remember she looked at me and she was like, "What are your values?" And I remember thinking, what is a value? And then we did some values work. It's actually a wonderful part of acceptance commitment therapy. And I didn't know that then, but that's what we were doing. And I really honed in on this value of authenticity as being one of my top 5 values. And I can't remember all the ins and outs of what led me to choose that as one of my top 5 values. But I do remember that process, and that was so formative for my therapeutic journey. I know that what I was trying to achieve through my body or through the eating disorder did not feel authentic. And so I know that part of my recovery process was practicing authenticity and showing up well, both for myself and other people in a way that was like honest and true to my authentic self. So yeah, when I thought about doing this episode, I was like, oh gosh, I have to share that story just because that was such a formative time in my life when I identified the value of authenticity. So I love the topic of authenticity. There's so many things that I could say about authenticity that I think you guys would probably resonate with as listeners. So Lauren, I don't know if you have any story like that or if something comes to mind for you when you think about the word authenticity, and what it actually means for you. I'd love to hear your working definition of it.
The most basic thing that comes to mind that perhaps some of us would feel is like a bit cliche is being yourself, right? And then that kind of begs the question, well, what does that mean? And how do we know who we are? And I think one of the things that feels significant to myself as a therapist and just my therapeutic style, if you will, is that being pretty foundational in the work that I'm doing with my clients, whatever they're presenting with and whatever the goals are and the work is that we're doing. Really, ultimately, my goal and kind of hope for my clients is to help them come back to themselves. So when I think of authenticity, I think of coming back to self. And then again, that begs the question, what does that mean? Right. And that means a lot of different things for a lot of different people. And so other words that come to mind are core self, you know, uh, I don't know, inner self, the part of us that is unchanging, and all of those things are, particularly as adults. And if you're not an adult and you're listening, that's okay. And if you are, great. Part of our adulthood, I think, means probably for most of us to some extent, I don't want to overgeneralize too much, but that probably means being kind of a little bit far away from maybe core self, inner self, authentic self, because because of the things that we experience in life that are painful and that hurt us and that maybe traumatize us, because we're human, because we walk through life and things happen that hurt us. That tends to grow distance between authentic core self and the ways that we kind of show up and operate in our day-to-day life. So learning to live authentically as an adult can be really, really hard. So that was all kind of a big thing that I just said. I know your question was, what does authenticity mean to you? So long story short, I feel like it means coming back to self, coming back to core self, and with the caveat of that can be really, really hard to do as an adult. So,
Yeah. There's a therapy that I know that you really, really use frequently. I definitely use some of it as well, but it's called internal family systems. And as you were talking, what stood out to me was this idea of these, what we call protector parts. So these parts of ourselves that develop really from a young age. And they're protectors because we think falsely, right? We falsely think that they will protect us from experiencing pain or shame or hurt or fear or whatever it might be. And so when you said that therapeutic style came to me, or that therapeutic modality, just in all of these parts that we develop to kind of hide our true selves, if that makes sense to y'all. And I know that you can speak a little bit more to internal family systems as you practice it quite frequently with clients. But when I think about my own parts that prevent me from being authentic, or that have prevented me in the past from being authentic, a couple things are coming to mind. So one is image management. So what I mean by that is it's the part of me that thinks that I need to appear a certain way. So for those of y'all that are, Enneagram gurus, I'm a 3 on the Enneagram, so 3s can also struggle with this, but how are other people perceiving me? And so when I'm in a place of unhealth, caring more about that versus what my values are or what I actually believe, and knowing why I believe those things, can become more important to me, and that can actually prevent me from living from a place of authenticity. So the image management really sticks out to me in terms of something that gets in the way of me practicing authenticity. The good news, though, is I've done quite a bit of therapy at this point, and I'm by no means perfect at it. But when it's happening, I know that it's happening, and I know, okay, how can I catch it? What do I need to do to kind of quiet this part? What does this part need? Does it need comfort? Does it need... do I just need to name that it's there and that I'm trying to image manage myself right now? And can I risk putting my true self out there, even if that means I'm not accepted, even if that means that not everyone loves me, even if that means that it feels really vulnerable? So Yeah, that therapy, if you guys haven't heard of it, look into it. It's a wonderful modality, internal family systems. But I think of these protector parts, so to speak, in air quotations, that get in the way of us practicing authenticity. And for me, image management, you could also call it like perfectionism, get in the way of practicing authenticity.
Yeah. Oh my gosh, I could say so many things are like coming up and popping in my head as you're talking.
Sure.
So when it comes to, living authentically, living an authentic life, showing up authentically in relationships, two kind of models of therapy come up for me when I'm thinking about like working with a client as we're like strengthening their ability to do this or whatever. And those are IFS and ACT. So internal family systems, like Laura was mentioning, and then ACT, acceptance and commitment therapy. So I feel like, when it comes to finding our authentic self, connecting with our authentic self, there's there are several different, perhaps, I don't know if steps is the right word, or ingredients or skills or whatnot that kind of are really important to put into place to help make the movement back to self the most, I don't know, like effective, or insert whatever word you want there. So some of those things being, first, just having awareness, just, internal awareness, insight into like your internal process of feelings and emotions and thoughts and physical sensations. And then, having awareness of your values, right? And just kind of circling back around to the values work piece of things. I was actually with a client once, and we were doing some ACT work. We were just talking about values, and I bet this can resonate with a lot of you guys listening. I know it can for me. She was struggling with knowing what she valued, and she felt a lot of shame for that. She felt like she should know what she values as an adult, as an almost 30-year-old. She felt like she hadn't put in the work to really have awareness of that. And so we kind of backed up a little bit and first really just validated, that makes a lot of sense, because I don't know if we, are spending a lot of time every day making lists of our values and thinking about that in a really, in-depth, introspective way. I don't do that every day. And B, the word value and knowing what we value or having values seems like this kind of obvious thing. And it's really, really, really hard work to know what you value. Like it's hard. It can be really hard, deep, uncomfortable work to do. And so those two things felt really important in that moment to name and highlight for her. And I, because I resonated with it even when she was going through that process in the session. And I can imagine that would perhaps be an experience that some people have listening here. So yeah, identifying, or first having awareness, and then doing some values work around identifying what your values are. And then, like Laura said, figuring out maybe what is getting in the way of you living in those values that you do have. And if we're looking at that from kind of the IFS lens or that model, then typically what does get in the way are these parts of us, like Laura said, that are trying really hard to protect us from feeling pain and from hurting and from really anything that we have experienced in life up until now that has caused some kind of rupture or some kind of harm. So it's really quite a clever thing that our bodies do to try and help us feel okay and feel safe. And then what we find as adults is that these parts of us actually kind of get in the way a little bit more than they are helpful. And so within IFS, internal family system, so we call this parts language. And these parts of us that protect, they're either our firefighter parts or our manager parts. And these two different parts, we don't have to get into all the nitty gritty of it, but essentially, yeah, they are kind of these overdeveloped, is what we call it, dysfunctional parts that want to protect us and swoop in and save the day. And for a while they work. For a while they do help until we start seeing how they don't, until we start realizing, oh, I'm showing up in all of these places in my life so far from being like true to myself. I'm just such this people pleaser, and I bend over backwards for everyone. And I just find at the end of every day, I am so just exhausted, and I'm so wiped, and I have no energy, and I'm completely drained because I've just been doing everything everybody else wants me to do, and I've completely ignored myself. We kind of come to this kind of crossroads of, okay, now something's got to change. And that's usually when we see people come in our office. And then we start this kind of work with them. And so yeah, just identifying what is getting in the way of being authentic, living in those values. So then within the ACT world, the acceptance and commitment therapy world, we identify those values. And again, we are figuring out what is getting in the way of us living in those values. And then we're establishing really practical like action steps that we can take daily to live within that value system. And that can look like anything from, reaching out to, a friend once a week to, practicing more mindfulness throughout the day, right? So I'm curious, Laura, I know that you said that your therapist really helped you identify what your values are. What else helps you know what you value? Like, how do you know what you value in life?
Yeah, I mean, I think another way of thinking about values is asking myself what's important to me. And so my family and friends, obviously, so these things guide how I spend my time and energy. Transparency, and that can be really interchangeable with authenticity as well. But, that really helps me kind of hone in on what my values are, is asking myself what is important to me and being honest with myself. So that's another piece about authenticity. Me being authentic in my true self may be different than someone else's version of authenticity because we may believe different things. It's not so much about what we believe, it's are we showing up in our truest self? So do we have the courage to show up in an authentic way and not shame ourselves, not criticize ourselves? But yeah, I mean, really asking myself what's important to me has been so huge, just in terms of me figuring out how I spend my time, what I value, and then, of course, how those behaviors inform what I choose to do. But yeah, it's interesting as we're talking through this concept of authenticity, one piece of I just keep circling back to this one thing of, I know that as I have healed and gone through recovery and had therapy and gone to my own therapy over the years, and as I sit with clients when they heal, when we become more authentic, we are naturally drawn to people that are authentic as well. So it's interesting because when we're living out of a place of inauthenticity, or when we're not living, in a way that is connected to our true selves, then we might be drawn to those type of people. But as we become more congruent, so what I mean by that is our insides matching our outside behaviors, we're naturally drawn to people that are that way as well. right? And that's not to say that we have to be friends with people who only think like us or who share the same values, but authenticity is like drawn to authenticity. So what I mean by that is people in my life that I cherish are also able to be authentic, right? And that's not me saying that they're perfect, but they practice authenticity. Like Lauren was saying, it's that daily kind of practice and daily choice. So that's an interesting note that I just wanted to validate that if y'all have had relationship shift over time, I wonder if some of it might be as you're doing the healing work that therapy requires, if you're naturally drawn to people that are more authentic. I certainly am not trying to criticize people that are inauthentic, but I know it can kind of put a bad taste in my mouth when I am around someone that maybe I know is kind of in their protective part. It can kind of just put a bad taste in my mouth, and that might be a judgment on my own behalf. But it's just interesting because I know as I've gotten healthier, I'm naturally drawn to people that are able to be authentic, able to be vulnerable, able to be honest, not only with themselves, but with me. So that's just something interesting that I wanted to just came up as you were talking, Lauren. Lauren has some homework for y'all. Lauren, if you want to go ahead and get the homework.
Yep. So a lot of things that we've already talked about today. I want to challenge you all to pay attention to where you notice you are your most authentic self. Who do you feel the safest to be your most true self with? Why? Why does it feel that way? And then where in your life, what spaces and people, maybe does it feel the hardest to show up the most authentically, the most vulnerably, if you will? And then a step from that would be what is getting in the way? Perhaps what are some of those like protective parts showing up for you? And what can you do to move towards more authenticity in those settings?
So as we wrap, we hope this has been helpful for y'all. We wanted to close with an affirmation, or really kind of a quote from the amazing Brené Brown. So some of you probably know her. If you don't, definitely look her up. She is just lovely. She talks about authenticity. So something kind of along the lines of what Lauren was talking about, but she says that authenticity is not something that we have or don't have. It's a practice, a conscious choice of how we want to live. Authenticity is a collection of choices that we have to make every day. It's about the choice to show up and be real, the choice to be honest, the choice to let our true selves be seen.